Country Watch Political Intelligence Briefing Quick Hits, a weekly briefing of hot stories across the world in brief. I'm Denise Youngblood-Coleman, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief and Senior International Affairs Analyst at Country Watch. This week, I'm covering Israel as the featured country, where the eight-party anti-Netanyahu opposition bloc has united to form a new government. Under the terms of the agreement, Naftali Bennett of Yamina would lead the power-sharing government as Israel's next prime minister. The rotating premiership meant that Bennett would be succeeded by Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid as prime minister. By June 2nd, the deadline, the Israeli opposition parties finalized agreements to form the new government. Lapid, who leads Yesh Atid, was the orchestrator and coordinator of the eight-party coalition agreement, which included his own party, Yesh Atid, the center-left Labour Party, the left-wing Meretz Party, the centrist Blue and White, the right-wing nationalist Israel Beitenu, as well as the right-wing Jewish nationalist Yamina Party, right-wing nationalist New Hope, and the Arab Islamist Ra'am Party. The reality was that the eight parties slated for the unity government had little in common, save a desire to see the end of Netanyahu's leadership at the helm of Israel. But Lapid had managed thus far to do the unthinkable, link together disparate parties from the right, through the center and to the left, including Jewish nationalists and the Arab Party in a unity government. The new unity government would face a confidence vote in the Knesset on or before June 14th. In the interregnum, it was clear that Netanyahu would place ultimate pressure on all right-wing members of parliament to abandon the commitments of their respective parties and scuttle the incoming unity change government. On June 8th, Knesset Speaker Yariv Levin announced that the confidence vote would be held during a special session of parliament on June 13th. If that vote failed to win the support of a majority in the 120-seat parliament, Israel would very likely face its fifth election in 2 years. Should the confidence vote pass, the new change government would be ratified and Naftali Bennett would become the new Prime Minister of Israel, with Yair Lapid set to assume that role after him in keeping with the terms of the rotating premiership. This would also mark the end of the Netanyahu era. Across the world, in the African country of Mali, there was a coup upon coup unfolding. The country endured a coup d'etat 10 months prior, with a military junta headed by Assimi Goïta seizing power. A transitional government was established, but in late May, transitional President Ba Nida and interim Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouani were stripped of their powers and placed in detention. By June, Goïta was inaugurated as the president and declared that he would oversee the transition phase to elections. In response, the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, and the African Unity Union suspended Mali from their organizations, and the World Bank temporarily paused payments to the country as a penalty. Moving on to Peru, there was a close contest in the second round of the Peruvian presidential election. The first round of the election took place in April, setting the stage for the second round to take place on June 6th between the left-wing candidate Pedro Castillo against the leader of the right-wing popular force, Keiko Fujimori. In the early hours of counting, results indicated a narrow edge for the right-wing Fujimori over socialist Castillo. But as the counting continued, Castillo moved into a slight lead ahead of Fujimori as more votes began to come in. It looks as if Castillo, the son of a peasant farmer, would cling to his lead, but a razor-thin victory would undoubtedly lead to political uncertainty in Peru. There would very likely be a spate of legal challenges to the votes, requests for recounts, and the potential for protests by supporters of the losing side was high. Staying in the Western Hemisphere, parliamentary elections were held in Mexico. The elections constituted a referendum on the leadership of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, also known as AMLO, his National Regeneration Movement, the Morena Party, and the Together We Will Make History coalition. After the votes were tallied, it was apparent that the ruling political coalition would hold its simple majority, but lose its qualified majority in the lower house of Congress. This result would inhibit AMLO from passing major legislation or constitutional changes without the help of opposition parties. In the next week, we'll be paying attention to the forthcoming election in Iran to determine the successor of outgoing Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. A list of 7 ultra-conservative candidates, including Judiciary Chief Ibrahim Raisi, were ultimately approved to contest the election by the Guardian Council. The ultra-conservative list was so clearly stacked to ensure the likely election of Raisi that it sparked mass criticism and even calls for an election boycott. But Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was undeterred by the criticism and demanded that voters ignore the boycott calls. Another focus will be the forthcoming Biden-Putin summit set for June 16th in Geneva, Switzerland. It should go without saying that President Vladimir Putin of Russia would not be inclined to improve relations with the United States. That goal should not be anticipated from the Russian leader. As noted by former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, Putin has rarely walked into a meeting with any head of state with the aim of improving relations. McFaul further noted Putin does not want a stable, predictable, or normal relationship with Washington. He needs the United States as an enemy. So we're going to break down some of the key practical benchmarks to measure the success of the bilateral meeting next week. Since Biden and Putin have extended the new strategic arms reduction treaty start, which would have left in place a foundation to renegotiate in 5 years' time, there's some proverbial runway, let's call it, to make some modest early progress on that front. We'll cover that in more detail next week, in addition to the potential for making progress on the JCPOA. That would be the Iran nuclear deal. Overall, the goal should be strategic stability talks. To that end, we will also talk about what Biden and his team need to do to comprehensively develop a strategy to contain and sometimes engage Putin. For more information about these and other stories, please read my political intelligence briefing and my coronavirus report, both of which are accessible from the front page of the Country Watch website at www.countrywatch.com. Have a great day. Thank you for your time, and remember that we live in an interconnected world.